How's it going, folks? I'm Des with DesFit, and this is the brand new Apple Watch Ultra, Apple's highly rumored outdoor-focused pro-level smartwatch. Now, this has been a super hyped-up watch, and probably for good reason because it's the first actual new design of an Apple Watch since they first came out. Now, I know many of you out there want to know all the ins and outs in the Ultra, so in this video, I'm going to be going into a ton of detail about the new hardware, the new software, and just like all my other reviews, a lot of focus on the sports and fitness performance, where I tested it for running, mountain biking, road biking, as well as weight training to see if it's truly a worthy device for sports. And I'd really encourage you to watch the entire video because I tested the Ultra in lots of different scenarios, like in the mountains, in the city. I did battery tests with the normal power mode as well as the low power mode, and I even did some charging tests. Oh, and you may have already noticed that the Apple Watch Ultra comes in a completely different box than what we've seen on other Apple Watches. So I have another video with a full unboxing, setup, and comparison of the Ultra with some other watches that may be of interest to you. So go ahead and check out that video once you're done over here. But I guess with that out of the way, let's talk about the Ultra. So first off, there's kind of no getting around the fact that the Ultra is much different than any other Apple Watch. It has a 49mm case versus the 45mm case of the Series 8, and it comes with a slightly larger display that's also twice as bright. And that display is super easy to read, even in the brightest of direct sunlight. And then it also has a new flat display versus the rounded off edges of a Series 8, and that makes the display seem even a little bit larger. That new display is protected with a sapphire lens, which increases the scratch resistance, and also has this metal lip around the display that's coming from its titanium case. And there's really only one option with the Ultra with this brushed titanium case, and the only options you have are really the bands, and it only comes in the GPS Plus cellular version. But don't worry, even though it has the cellular hardware on board, you don't have to sign up for a cellular plan if you don't want to. The Ultra is a rather large watch though, especially compared to even the largest of other Apple Watches. So if you're coming from another Apple Watch, the difference is going to be substantial. And then other than the size, there's also the weight, and that's also something very noticeable going from a Series 7 or Series 8. But if you're used to wearing a larger and heavier watch like a Garmin Fenix 7 or a Garmin Epix, it's probably not that big a deal. Now, wearability is one thing in regards to weight, but weight also can factor into hardware accuracy. Why? Because optical heart rate sensors, well, they don't like a lot of movement, and larger and heavier watches, well, they can bounce around on the wrist a little bit more, even if you crank them down really tightly. So for instance, Garmin, they use the same heart rate sensor on their very small Venue 2S all the way up to their largest Fenix 7X and Enduro 2, and I tend to find better accuracy on these smaller devices, and this is something that I've seen for years. How does the Ultra stack up? Well, we'll find out in just a bit after we finish up talking about the new hardware and some of the new software features. The new Ultra also has a larger digital crown that's protected by this new button guard, and that larger digital crown also has a fairly aggressive texture to it, and it certainly makes it easier to use with gloves. The crown and the buttons do seem to have a little bit of a different feel to them, where the button on the crown feels much more stiff than something like the Series 8. In addition, the side button along with the new action button have a very positive and clicky feel to them, which I quite like. Now, I like the texture of the larger digital crown for the most part. However, since that crown is larger, I tend to notice it quite a bit more on my skin on the underside. There's also the new action button, and this is something that expands the usability of the Ultra a lot. So first off, it's a quick way of accessing different functions, so you can set it up for workout-specific functions. Automatically starting a stopwatch, dropping a waypoint, starting the backtrack feature, enabling the dive feature, turning on the flashlight, accessing shortcuts, or you can turn it off altogether if you'd like. What's neat about the action button too is that it's quite customizable for workouts. So here in the settings, you'll first choose the app, and right now it just defaults to the native workout app, but third-party developers will be able to leverage this action button. So I'm super excited to see how third-party apps can utilize it. But for now, it's the native workout app. And then from there, you can choose to either open the workout app or immediately start a workout with the first press of the action button. And you can choose what workout you want. But strangely, it currently only includes cycling, walking, and running workouts here. I'm not really sure why you can't choose any other workout. But then when you press the action button, it just automatically starts the workout as you would expect. And then during the workout, you can manually mark a segment pressing the action button again. However, my favorite feature of the action button is that you can use it in conjunction with the other side button or the digital crown to pause the workout. It's just now that you can use any combination of two buttons together to pause the workout, which is awesome. Now, one thing I do have to mention about that action button though is that for some reason or another, I have accidentally pressed the action button on more than one occasion. So if you have it set to just start a workout, you may look down and discover that you've just started a workout even if you're just chilling on your couch. Another thing that's new with the Ultra is a new precision start feature. And again, I really like this feature. So what this will do is when you go to start a workout, rather than that 3-second countdown that you would normally get, it changes to kind of this getting ready for the workout kind of page where it has the workout all loaded up and basically is waiting for you to start the workout at that exact moment that you want. And in addition, this is something that I've been wanting all the way back to the Series 3 when I reviewed it, is a GPS indicator letting you know if you actually have a GPS fix before starting. And then when you're ready to go, all you have to do is press the action button, but you can can also swipe to the right to start too. Oh, and really quick, if you're finding the information in this video useful, do me a favor, just quickly hit that like button down below. It's a small little thing that you can do that'll help this video and the channel quite a bit, and I appreciate it. Now, the precision start feature is an ultra-only feature, and it's mainly due to the action button, and I totally get that. However, if you can also swipe to the right and start the workout from there, well, you could totally do that on other Apple Watches. In addition, maybe there could be some other actions like maybe double tapping on the screen or pressing the digital crown and the side button together to start the workouts, which seems like it would be totally viable on other Apple Watches. Also, with the GPS indicator that's only available if you enable the precision start feature, I think that's something, again, that all Apple Watch owners could benefit from, not just Ultra users. It's just something that's a little bit nebulous right now when you go to start an outdoor workout, where you kind of just don't know whether or not you have a GPS lock. The Ultra also comes with a new 86 decibel siren, which I thought was a very interesting addition, and you can enable this by long pressing the action button, and then you'll swipe to the right to start it up. And this siren, it is loud, folks, like surprisingly loud, and they say that you can hear it from up to 600 feet away. So what it does is that it starts out as a distress pattern, and then after a while it switches to a global SOS pattern. And of course there's many use cases for this. So let's say if you're in the outdoors and you're mobile or something like that, well, it's a great way of sending out a distress alert. And even in urban environments, it's a great way of attracting attention if you feel like you're in danger or something like that. The Ultra I'm reviewing came with a new Alpine Loop, and this is a pretty unique loop with, well, additional loops on the outside where you can attach the titanium hook. It's super comfortable, it's very lightweight, it's stretchy, and it doesn't hold moisture all that much, and it dries out extremely quickly after workout. My only complaint about it, though, is that it's slightly challenging to adjust the size quickly, so the hook is super secure with a good amount of curve to it, so it's extremely unlikely to come undone, but at the same time, it can make taking it on or off a little bit more cumbersome. The new Ultra also comes with 3 microphones versus the 2 that you'll find on other Apple Watches, and what the additional microphone is intended to do is improve clarity and reduce things like wind noise. And of course, the new Ultra comes with all the new features that just came out with the Series 8, so it has the wrist temperature sensor, it has the new high-G accelerometer to try to detect severe car crashes, as well as all the other features like ECG, blood oxygen saturation measurements, as well as more detailed sleep analytics. For battery life, the Ultra comes with a battery that's 76% larger than the Series 8, which essentially doubles the battery life from the 18-hour claim to 36 hours. And that's under their assumption of typical use, including plenty of notifications, texts, as well as even recording a 1-hour outdoor activity within that time period. But just like all other Apple Watches that I've tested, the Ultra is exceeding the estimates. We're surpassing the 36 hours, more like 40 to 42 hours before I have to charge it again. And this was with the normal power mode, even with a couple hours of workouts. And then for battery life for recording outdoor activities, here's the mountain bike ride that I was just talking about, which was right around 2.5 hours. I started out with 52% before the ride, and I had 37% when I got done. And again, this was just using the out-of-the-box settings with the always-on display enabled. So basically doing the simple math, that means that I could get over 16 hours, which is well above their claim of 12 hours. There is also a new workout-specific low power mode that's coming soon where it'll reduce the GPS and heart rate samplings to extend battery life even further. But as of right now, it's just a global low power mode where it'll disable the always-on display, it won't take background heart rate measurements, it will disable the blood oxygen saturation sensor, and it'll also limit the amount of times it connects to your phone for notifications. But even in this global low power mode, it's supposed to extend the battery life from the 12 hours to 15 hours with full GPS and heart rate sampling. So like on this ride, I started out at 99% of the battery and then went out for an hour and 45 minutes. And at the end of the ride, I had 91% left. And just by doing the simple math, that means it was using about 5% per hour, which means that I may be able to get up to 20 hours of use out of it. And again, this is even without the new workout specific low power mode. And for how long it'll last in its current low power mode that's coming out at launch, over 2 days ago, about 52 hours to be exact, I started out with a full charge and I had 3.5 hours of outdoor workouts as well as the 30-minute indoor workout. And it still has 20% remaining. So it looks like I can maybe get about 2.5 days. The Ultra also supports fast charging with their USB-C fast charging cable, which they include in the box, and this is where you're supposed to be able to get about an 80% charge in an hour and a full charge in 1.5 hours. So right around an hour of charging, it came up a bit shy of that 80% claim where it had about a 70% charge from empty. 80% seemed to take about an hour and 13 minutes, at least on this test, but it did just take a little bit over an hour and a half to get a full charge, so the claims seemed to be pretty close there. And speaking of power, the Ultra also comes with a new running power feature that came out with watchOS 9. And just for a quick refresher, running power is just an additional tool that you can use for training. So pace can be a great indicator, but it also can be skewed with things like hilly terrain, wind, and the surfaces that you're running on. So running power basically just tries to create a little bit more unbiased metric for the amount of power that you're using to propel yourself. And at this point, there really is no industry standard for running power where you may see 200 watts on one device, where you may see 300 on the other. And that's not really important. What is important is that the trends line line up, as in if I'm using more power to, let's say, sprint up or go up a hill, all the devices show an increase and vice versa. And that's very much what I'm seeing out of the new Apple Watch Ultra, as well as the new Series 8 and the second generation SE. And Apple Watches tend to line up with something like a Stride foot pod, as well as the wrist-based power from the Chorus Vertex 2, at least from a number standpoint. And then the higher numbers that you see are from an HRM Pro Plus chest heart rate strap from Garmin, as well as their RD foot pod. And they just report a little higher number. And another quick note about running power is that you may have noticed that if you're using the Strava to Apple Health Sync for workouts, running power isn't coming over to Strava, at least at the time of this filming. However, you can use the HealthFit iOS app to sync your Apple Watch running workouts to Strava, which will actually bring over that running power. And before we get into GPS accuracy, let's also talk about their new Compass app. And with this, you're able to save waypoints by simply pressing the lower left-hand button, and then you can assign different labels to them for things like maybe where you parked your car, something cool that you saw on the trail, or where maybe you stashed some cookies. And then you can access all your saved locations in the upper left-hand corner here, where you can click on one of them to find them again. In addition, it also has a trackback feature, which can also automatically enable if you happen to go off the grid. But under normal circumstances, you have to manually start this feature by tracing your steps, which you can then go and retrace your steps to get back to where you came from. And I do like that they added this backtrack feature, but I also see some room for improvement. So I would love to see this just automatically enable if I were to start, let's say, a hiking workout or a running workout or even a cycling workout. In addition to that, the backtrack feature is kind of contained within the Compass app at this point, where it gives you kind of just like a basic breadcrumb trail sort of thing, along with an arrow just kind of giving you a general direction of which way to go. If they were to integrate that with maps, that would be a lot more powerful. The Ultra also comes with a new, more powerful GPS chipset where it can leverage more than one satellite frequency at one time versus the one frequency that you can get on other Apple Watches. And the reason for this sort of technology is that around really tall buildings, rock faces, as well as a lot of heavy tree cover, satellite signals can kind of bounce off those objects, creating inaccurate GPS tracks as well as inaccurate distances sometimes. This sort of technology is something that we've been seeing out of a lot of different manufacturers over the last couple of years, but just because a device does have this sort of technology, it doesn't necessarily mean that accuracy is equal across the board. It's about how each company implements it, including factors such as antenna design. So to start out with, here's a 10K run, and everything lines up pretty well for the most part between all these devices that are also using dual band satellite systems. And then taking a look at the GPS tracks, it was near perfect, and this was just a run around some neighborhoods. But now let's go for a run around some taller buildings where satellite signals can start to get iffy. But on this run, again, good stuff in regards to the total distance. And then for the finer detail of the GPS tracks, in the wide open streets, pretty solid for the most part, no real complaints. Where it gets more interesting though is around some of these tall buildings. So we see that it nailed it around this corner where the device in light blue cut in. But then right here, it cut into the building just slightly, as well as right here. From there, things were looking really good, except for maybe this corner right here where it cut in just a little bit. Now here's where I went through a narrow alleyway in between some taller buildings, but the Ultra did great here, but kind of did overshoot into the street a little bit upon exiting. And then beside these taller buildings right here, it was good to go. And then for something a bit longer, here's a road ride, and again, solid stuff in regards to the total distance. And then for the GPS tracks, I scoured over this ride. It was near perfect compared to the other devices. However, I did find just two spots where it kind of cut in just slightly where the other devices were just a little more accurate. So on this ride, again, the total distance lined up pretty well with the Garmin Enduro 2, as well as the corrected distance from Strava, which adjusts the distance based on their maps. In addition, the Ultra also did well for tracking the total elevation gain using its built-in altimeter compared to the other devices, as well as Strava's corrected elevation figure. So as we started out the ride, coincidentally on Apple Valley Road, this road is right next to a mountain, so it has basically a big rock face right next to it that can interfere with satellite signals, but we see the Ultra did great here. As we move up to this upper loop here, the Ultra was doing extremely good. However, all of what I've been showing you so far has been just going up at slower speeds, but now let's move on to the downhill section of this ride. So as I started to descend on these two curves here, the Ultra wasn't quite as good, but in all fairness, on the second curve, nearly all the devices missed it. Moving down a little bit further, we see that all the devices overshoot this corner, but the other devices seem to get a faster lock back onto the trail. And then going down the Bitterbrush Trail here, things were looking pretty good out of the Ultra, but maybe not quite as precise as the others, but still pretty good even through this heavy tree cover. Right here, we see it sort of ignore these curves altogether though, and then it had a little bit of an issue with this corner. However, once we're back on the road, it was super crispy again, where it was super solid. So when it comes to the new dual band satellite systems, well, I think it does a pretty decent job, but it's far more accurate in urban environments versus the trail. And I think what comes into play here is that Apple is able to fuse the GPS data that's collected on the watch with their map data for more accurate GPS tracks. So my thinking is that they just don't have as much data for trails as they do for the street. So that's where I saw the corner cutting on the mountain bike trails versus the urban environments where those were rock solid. Okay, so now on to heart rate accuracy. So in all my testing of Apple Watches over the last 5 years, I found their heart rate sensors to be some of of the most accurate on the market, including the new Series 8, and the Ultra uses the same sensor. However, the Ultra does have a slight disadvantage, the weight, which I found can have an effect on accuracy with other devices that I've tested. So I guess let's see how the Ultra performed. So here's an indoor bike ride, which is usually my first test just to get a baseline on a new device, and the Ultra did very well here. There were just a handful of spots that stood out to me, like right here it read a few beats per minute low for a moment, right here where it read a little bit high just for a second, and then on these 2 sprints it had a second or 2 delay, but that's pretty typical for a wrist-based optical heart rate sensor, as we can see from the purple line, which is the 2nd gen Apple Watch SE I was wearing on the other wrist. And then taking the Ultra outside for some road biking, this is where we start to introduce more variables for wrist-based optical heart rate sensor to deal with, like vibration and bumps in the road, which can throw off these types of sensors. And the Ultra, once again, did pretty darn well here. The only spot where I did see an issue with it though was right here where it read high, which I found to be interesting because I was actually stationary at the moment. And then for weight training, the Ultra was very respectable here too. It did read a bit high for these 3 sets of tricep extensions, but as you can see from the line that's in purple, which is an arm optical heart rate sensor, there's just some variance that happens with this sort of activity. But the Ultra did do very well tracking the high intensity intervals at the end. Now with heart rate for running, I left this for last because I experienced some pretty interesting results here. So here are the first 3 runs that I did with the Ultra, and definitely not as accurate as the other workouts. The first 2 runs, by the way, were on my left wrist, and then after seeing those results, I switched to my right wrist just to see if there's going to be any difference. It wasn't crazy off and no wild spikes or anything like that, but just reading about 8 to 10 beats per minute high on portions of the run, and at the beginning of each run, a little gap in heart rate. And on those runs, I did exactly what I do for all my workouts, where I'll move the watch a little bit higher up on my arm so there's more flesh for the sensor to work with, and also tighten down the strap a little bit tighter than how I would normally wear it throughout the day. Basically, just best practices for getting more accurate heart rate during workouts. And as we saw from my Series 8 as well as my SE review, I was getting phenomenally good results out of those devices worn the same way. So what I did just this morning actually is I went on yet another run, but this time around I really snugged the Ultra down quite a bit. Not like cutting off circulation tight, which you shouldn't do either, but just tighter than I normally would. And lo and behold, that's what I'm talking about. Quite accurate to all the other test devices, including the FX2 on my other wrist. The only bobble I saw was right at the beginning where it tracked a bit high just for a moment, but the rest was good to go. So that's what I'm talking about, where the weight of a watch can have an effect on accuracy, where I had to wear the Ultra even tighter than I normally would. So if you are experiencing inaccurate results from your Ultra, just try 1 notch tighter. What's great though is that you still do have the ability to pair an external Bluetooth heart rate sensor to the Ultra if you prefer, but unfortunately we still don't have the ability to pair ANT+ external sensors. So I like where Apple's going with the Ultra, and it's great to see the longer battery life, and it's also great to see that it's exceeding their claims. Doubling, if not more, the battery life from other Apple Watches is a pretty big deal when people are used to charging their watches daily. The battery life still isn't to the level of what you can get from some other outdoor-focused sports watches, but I think the Ultra is still going to be a big hit, especially with current Apple Watch owners. But the big question is, of course, is it compelling enough to bring someone over who's used to much longer battery life from something like a Garmin? And I'd say, kind of depends. Well, I think it's going to be tough for people who are used to a week or more of battery life. I do see the Ultra as an option for somebody considering, let's say, a Venue 2 Plus or a Garmin Epix, which have similar display technologies, but those watches do get longer battery life. But of course, they don't have the smartwatch features or the tight iPhone integration of the Ultra. And I do see the Ultra as also being a really appealing option for existing Apple Watch owners who have been considering another brand because of longer battery life and durability. For someone who wants multiple weeks of battery life, the Ultra is going to be a tougher sell. I think the Ultra is going in a good direction in terms of the hardware, and it also came with some very welcome software features, but at the same time it seemed like kind of a short list. So it has the Backtrack feature, but that's not integrated with maps. Very nice new running features with watchOS 9, but it seems like cyclists may have been forgotten about this year, and then very nice new dive features as well, but certainly for a more specific audience. It may come down to where Apple goes from here with their native software. There are certainly some great third-party apps out there like Work Outdoors that can extend the functionality of the Ultra, but again, it's kind of a question of whether you want to juggle multiple apps versus having it built all in one. So as of right now, I don't necessarily think that the Ultra is a Garmin killer or anything like that. I think it's a good start, but there's some work to be done. Either way, the Ultra has certainly shaken things up, and it's making things very exciting. But those are just my thoughts on the Ultra, but I also want to hear about what you think. So definitely leave your comments down in the comments section down below. And on your way down there, if you found the information in this video useful, do me a favor and just quickly hit that like button, and also subscribe for plenty of videos coming up, including comparisons of the Ultra to some other sports watches on the market. In the meantime, have fun out there, and we will see you in the next video.